I appreciate you joining us, Mr. Elcock, in this live telecast. And my first question is that shouldn't Canada and its agencies and its government be more involved in focusing about how a Khalistani separatism has been able to find shelter and encouragement on Canadian soil against India, rather than charging at India and making these claims? The Trudeau government should actually have been involved in focusing what exactly is happening on their soil being misused. What do you have to say on that, sir?
I guess my comment on that would frankly be that while there is some history of Khalistani extremism in Canada, and indeed going back to Air India and other incidents, some terrorist incidents, the reality is Canada has dealt with those issues. I guess I would say that what the government has been clear about here is that while it has received requests from the government of India to deal with issues of what the government of India sees as Khalistani separatism and Khalistani terrorism, the reality is the government of Canada has been quite clear that the government of India has failed to provide sufficient evidence to actually allow the government of Canada to act in any respect.
You've also been, because the Director of the Intelligence Services, you tell us, sir, that according to your information, has the situation changed in Canada? What earlier could have been perhaps a shelter that was given in any form, that there are increasing activities that are taking place in Canada that may appear anti-India, specifically with regard to Khalistan referendum, the Brampton parade, where former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassins are showcased as heroes. There are flyers of Kill India that are circulated, and no government should logically be permitting any of this.
The reality is that it is the responsibility of the government of Canada to ensure that that within Canada there are not organizations that target other countries, either through terrorism or any other way. Having said that, the targeted assassination of a Canadian citizen is not excused by any action that may have been taken by anybody in Canada.
But you know what I found very interesting was, because of this man Hardeep Singh Nijaar, who India has consistently given evidence about, a man who has forged his passport, tried to illegally enter into Canada, was allowed in and out, that he had ties with terrorism and extremism, and India kept sharing those facts. You tell us, sir, how does a man like that get citizenship? And by 2015, as one of the ministers, I believe, has also confirmed it, he didn't have that citizenship for a long time. You've also been in the intelligence. How does a man like that, and should he have got citizenship? Should there have been more checks and balances that the services in Canada should have also done against such a man getting the citizenship in the first place?
I guess I would say in response to that, frankly, the government of Canada has been quite clear that it has not received sufficient information from the Indian government to allow it to take any action against anybody, including the individual you're describing. If the government of India doesn't provide the information, it's not possible for the government of Canada to take action. If the government of India would like action to be taken, then it needs to provide information, and it needs to provide information that can actually be used. Otherwise, there is no way to resolve the problem. The ball, in some senses, is in the government of India's court. If the government of India has information about, and was true in my day with the service, if the government of India has information that it wishes to provide to Canada, then it's information that the government of Canada will pay attention to and act upon. But if the government of India doesn't provide information or doesn't provide accurate information, then there's no way for the government of Canada to act.
Yes, Mr. Elcock, because would you like to elaborate on that? Because according to my information and research, in the past many years, India has consistently rallied lists and evidences of the cases against him. He's been seen flaunting weapons, he's been seen indulging in activities and in trying to foment secessionist feelings, trying to train. All of that has been conveyed to Canada. Are you saying that much more needed to be done, or needs to be done even now? Because it is the Trudeau government that has made a claim that India has made it. For a Prime Minister to say that, sir, in the House of the Commons against a country, it's not something that is easily said unless you want a diplomatic war with another nation.
Neither of us are within government, so neither of us know exactly what the communications are between Canada and India. But the government of Canada has frankly been quite clear that the information it has received from the Indian government is insufficient to allow it to do what the government of India would like it to do. There is no question that it is important for the government of Canada to make sure that there is no place for terrorism in Canada to be targeted against some other country in the world. Having said that, if the government of India chooses not or is incapable of providing accurate information to the government of Canada that allows it to operate against a terrorist organization, then there is no solution to the problem. It is up to the government of India to provide that information so the government of Canada can take some action.
Mr. Elcock, you've been the director of the Intelligence Services of Canada for, if I'm correct, from 1994 to 2004. That's a decade precisely. Do tell us about your experience at that time, because ever since, actually since 1982, India has been pressing some demands for extradition. What do you have to say about those 10 years? Was Khalistan separatism increasing even back then, or was it after 2004 that it has seen a peak on Canadian soil?
Oh, I think it was earlier that Khalistani separatism and terrorism was in fact a problem. Go back to Air India, which was occurred before the bombing of Air India, and the Narita bombing, which took place well before I was the director of CSIS. So those are very early times. The reality is terrorism doesn't go away easily. Terrorism can continue. Terrorist organizations can restart. The only way for terrorism to be dealt with is, frankly, through cooperation between governments. Targeted killings or targeted assassinations are never a way to deal with these issues, particularly between democratic nations. The only way to deal with those issues is through the exchange of information. But at the end of the day, if sufficient information is not provided to allow a government like the government of Canada to deal with a terrorist organization or to deal with specific individuals, then the problem can't be solved.
But don't you see, sir, as a former intelligence officer, that all that has taken place in Canada gives enough evidence about the sort of movement, the sort of Khalistan project that's taking shape? And while they are present in even UK, Australia, the sort of attention, action and the visibility that they get in Canada is not as scary perhaps to India right now, but should be concerning to Canada itself. And how do you think that should be also taken up? Because it's not just about freedom of speech. Some of those actions can actually be seen as inciting violence against India, against another nation on Canadian soil. Is that something, do you think, the intelligence agencies would be tracking very closely?
The intelligence agencies would, I'm sure, be very concerned about information that terrorist acts or terrorist organizations were operating in Canada against any other country. Having said that, the reality is, just because somebody professes support for Khalistani independence or a separate state in Khalistan, a separate Khalistani state, is not sufficient evidence of terrorist activity. If the government of India is incapable of providing sufficient information to allow the government of Canada to act against an organization here that is indeed terrorist, then it is very difficult for the government of Canada to do something. So really, to some extent, the ball is in the court. It is in the court of the government of India. If it can't provide sufficient information, the problem can't be solved.
Well, I would like to believe that, yes.
Even if there were terrorist organizations operating from Canada, the idea that targeted assassination of a Canadian citizen was a solution to the problem but
that's also a claim. That's also a claim by the Canadian Prime Minister. It's not that Trudeau himself has given any evidence on that, and that's why the worsening relations between India and Canada are presently. I appreciate you joining us, Mr. Elcock. He's the former director of the Canadian Intelligence Agency. He's giving his perspective, and perhaps India can only keep pushing and ensure that Canada becomes more aware of the sort of movement and project it's actually encouraging and sheltering. I appreciate you joining us, sir. Thank you very much for now.